Hello, I'm Dr. Elaine Allmiller, Superintendent of Schools of District 57. My team and I are pleased to share with you our plans for reopening school in August. We've all been on an unexpected journey since last March with a lot of twists and turns along the way, and there are still many unknowns and uncertainties with regard to COVID-19 and its impact on schools. But one thing I can say for certain is that our number one priority in District 57 is to effectively educate our students and make sure they remain challenged, engaged, and supported, but in a way that is safe for them as well as for staff, even if the public health situation continues to evolve. So today we present the District 57 Readiness Plan to safely re-engage students and staff in the 2021 school year. I'm going to provide you with some initial information, and then Dr. Mary Gore, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, and Adam Parisi, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, will give you a detailed overview of our current plan. At the end, we will share important next steps, including the fall attendance plan form that we will need for each student by Monday, July 27th. As you know, we are now in Phase 4 of the Restore Illinois plan to reopen the state. This revitalization phase permits gatherings of 50 people or fewer and allows schools to reopen as long as they follow guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health and Illinois State Board of Education. The official guidance was released to school districts and the public on June 23rd. Since then, my administrative team and I, with help from the Staff and Administrator Task Force, have been refining our plans for transitioning back to school on August 20th. What has gone into this process? Well, we've spent a great deal of time making sure we're up to speed on the latest advice from the public health experts, analyzing the state guidance while determining what it means for our 4 schools, and gathering feedback from our stakeholders, parents and guardians, as well as staff. We sent another survey to parents and guardians after the state released its guidance. We had an excellent response rate of 1,500. I thank the many families who took time to share their feedback because this has been a very important part of our planning process. Here you can see a summary of what we learned. Based on the information that was available at the time, 59% said they would definitely send their students back to school for in-person learning in the fall, while 39% expressed hesitancy. 41% of parents said they would like to have the option of enrolling their students in full-time remote learning. Dr. Mary Gore is now going to tell you about staff feedback and the role of the task force, and then get into specifics about the fall.
Thank you, Dr. Allmiller. My name is Mary Gore, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning here in District 57, and I'm grateful to be with you tonight to talk about our plans and the work that we've engaged in over the summer to prepare for fall 2020. I want to take a moment to thank Dr. Allmiller for her leadership and the Board of Education for being supportive in our work, as well as our entire administrative team and all the staff who have worked tirelessly to ensure that what we are sharing tonight is viable and driven by our ideals to support quality education for children in District 57. I also want to thank all of the District 57 parents who participated in our surveys, our focus group sessions, and contacted us individually to share suggestions and concerns and support for this work. This truly has been unprecedented in nature. However, I am reassured that District 57 is an incredible district with incredible people who are committed around a common purpose. And I'm confident that we will continue in that spirit and do whatever it takes to keep our students and staff learning and thriving in a safe environment. I want to take a moment to talk about our staff leadership in our return to school planning. We've had wonderful participation across our staff in our district surveys. And in these surveys, our staff have indicated a desire for some options, both an in-person option and a remote learning option, which is consistent with what families have also expressed in surveys. We've had a committed task force who has worked many hours to provide different perspectives around this challenge. And there are representatives staff members from each of our 4 schools and our administration building, altogether with 63 teachers, ESP staff members, and administrators on this team. We've had 3 working groups hard at work this summer. The operational planning team has been led by my colleague, Adam Parisi and Sarah Tyberski, and the teaching and learning teams for in-person instruction and also remote instruction have been led by myself and Sarah Tyberski. So we are very grateful for her leadership as she supports our work as the Director of Student Services. I want to also thank our MPEA and MPESPA union leadership teams. They have been extremely collaborative and supportive and willing to have ongoing conversations where we are ensuring that all planning is aligned with our commitments and our values to provide high quality learning and safe environments for students and staff. They continue to be invaluable, and we work very closely to ensure that all decisions are made with all of our stakeholders in mind. Now I'm going to talk about the overview of the choices that all District 57 parents will be asked to choose between. We are asking that parents make a decision by Monday, July 27th, in order for us to have appropriate planning and programs in place to accommodate the requests. We are eager to get this right, but we are going to need your support to have enough time to make arrangements and change our existing plans to accommodate 2 options. The first option will be full-time in-person learning. This will, of course, include increased health and safety modifications, increased cleaning and sanitation, a requirement that all students and staff wear masks as required by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois State Board of Education. We will also practice social distancing and limit student movement to reduce exposure. And very much like our schools as we have always imagined them to be, our focus will be on assessment-informed instruction that is aligned to critical learning standards. The second option parents will have will be to participate in full-time remote learning. Unlike last spring, we will have a more robust model of remote learning that will include a much more similar schedule to the in-person school day. Students will have daily live instruction from teachers, opportunities for small group instruction, and there will also be a focused assessment-informed instruction model that will be aligned to critical learning standards. We are requiring families who select a remote learning option for their students to commit to the first grading period, which in middle school would be the first quarter, and in elementary school would be the first trimester. Now I'm going to talk about how we will handle confirmed and suspected cases of COVID and how that will impact our models. As required by ISB and IDPH, any individual who has been in close contact with a person who has tested positive for COVID-19 must self-quarantine for 14 days. Specifically, any individual required to quarantine during close contact will transition to a remote learning plan. So it's important to note that even if families select in-person learning for their students, we also have to recognize that due to COVID-19 response protocols, they may be required to engage in remote learning should there be a confirmed case or exposure to an individual with COVID. Families and staff will be asked to report possible cases to our school and district where individuals attend to help us engage in contact tracing. Nurses' offices will collect symptom reports when absences are reported, and 72 hours must elapse from a resolution of fever without fever-reducing medication, and 10 days must pass after symptoms first appeared prior to students' or staff's return. If a staff member or student is found to test positive for COVID, we will follow IDPH guidance regarding quarantine and up to the potential closure of a school. So here are the anticipated conditions we expect for this fall. We expect that students may move from in-person learning to remote learning for a period of time. We are committed for both in-person and remote experiences to provide similar expectations around coursework and grading. We anticipate that remote learning will follow the same schedule as in-person learning, and that in both of these models, we have a consistent goal for all students to feel safe, connected, and have access to high-quality learning. Now I'm going to talk about our special education considerations. Whether families select in-person learning or a remote learning option, they can count on collaborative IEP partnerships with their child's IEP teams. And just as we always do, IEP teams will collect data on students' current learning levels and unique needs to ensure that the IEP goals and supports are appropriate. 504 plans or IEPs may be reviewed on an individual basis should health and safety requirements be needed. And health and safety modifications across our special education programs may look different based on individual classroom or programmatic needs. But we want to emphasize to our families with children with IEPs and 504 plans that we are committed to collaboration and providing fully appropriate supports for your children. We also want to point out that whether your student participates in in-person or remote learning this fall, that we are focused on fostering empowered learners. Specifically, we will provide social emotional learning supports for all children with an emphasis on connectedness, safety, and supportive relationships. Teachers will provide weekly SEL meetings with students to provide responsive supports and education, such as coping strategies and how to work through disappointing or unexpected situations, which has been very important for all of us to learn during this season. We also will be providing much instruction and support around technology for all District 57 children. All students from kindergarten through 8th grade will have their own Chromebook. We are able to use existing resources to provide these Chromebooks for children and did not require significant additional purchasing. Teachers will provide lessons to help students learn functioning skills for online learning, again, in recognition that even if children are in-person learning, we need to be prepared for a shift to remote learning. And teachers will be providing all children with instruction around using tech tools and solid digital citizenship so that we are fully preparing children to engage in an online environment with agency and skill. And also we need to provide really consistent and clear instruction around what classroom routines and daily expectations will look like, both in person and in a remote environment. Now I'm going to go in depth in what will be offered in our in-person learning model. Just as we had prior to schools closing last March, our full-time in-person learning model will focus on high-quality instruction aligned to critical learning standards. That won't change. But we do need to start with prioritizing what potential learning loss or even acceleration may need to occur as a result of the pandemic. We know that given that our children haven't been in school since last March, our staff will be anticipating potential gaps in learning compared to typical years, and we will provide comprehensive assessment plans to ensure that teachers have the most important data about their children to inform their instruction. We will also need to prioritize the most critical standards and prerequisite skills for each subject area and grade level to really ensure that instruction is aligned to the most critical learning, and children are maximizing the time that they have available for learning. And we really will continue to use data to drive our instruction, which is a model that we use during any given year. As mentioned earlier, we will provide regular social emotional learning lessons for children. We are committed to restorative practices and believe fully that our students and staff need protected opportunities to develop relationships and feel connection to each other, to provide support and an environment where everyone can thrive. So we will be engaging in that work in-person learning, although we will, of course, be adhering to social distancing in doing so. Our elementary music, art, and LRC skills lessons will be held in the general education classroom as opposed to students traveling to these environments in a typical year. For PE, we will be using our gyms, but when weather allows, PE will be held outside. And if weather does not allow or the PE gym is not available, the PE classes will be held in the classroom. We are determining what band will look like and can ensure that any recommendations will be aligned to the health and safety precautions by IDPH and ISB. And there will be no field trips or assemblies due to the limitations of our current Phase 4 in the Restore Illinois model that prohibits gatherings of 50 people or more. Meetings, professional development opportunities, and all of these types of activities will be held using an online video format. Now I'm going to introduce my colleague, Adam Parisi, the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, who will be talking about safety protocols for the in-person learning option.
Hello. Now I'm here to talk about a lot of the logistical things for in-person learning. As was mentioned before, going back to school is going to look very different than it did under a normal atmosphere. So first, we're going to talk about some arrival and dismissal procedures. And keep in mind, as we're going through these logistics, everything is going to be revolving around keeping our students safe and our staff members safe. So first of all, students will be kept 6 feet apart. It will take a number of minutes to get ourselves into school. We envision at the beginning of the school year, first day or so, that will take longer. And as that students and family members and staff members get used to the procedure, that time will speed up. There will be markings on the floors throughout the buildings to encourage that spacing, to help with that arrival and keeping those kids apart. We're going to increase the use of our exterior doors so we can spread our students out. We can have many more entry points as far as moving students into the building and out of the building. And then importantly, when students first arrive to school, they're not going to be able to congregate in their groups. They're going to be let into school in their classes earlier than they normally would in a regular atmosphere. As we are well aware, recommendations from IDPH CDC, all students and staff will be required to wear masks. For those of you that want to prepare your students for that or children for that and practice prior to that, we encourage you to do so, but students will have to wear masks throughout the entire day. Desks will be spread apart, but in many cases, they will not be 6 feet. On the right here, you see an example of a typical classroom. And with that spacing, it looks a lot more than a traditional classroom setting. Classrooms are set up in rows. Desks are facing the front, where a teacher will be teaching from the front of the classroom. For those times that we have small group instruction, which we know is essential, we are purchasing plexiglass dividers to provide an extra barrier of safety for those staff and students. In addition to that, we are moving ahead in hiring additional daytime custodians. Their main responsibility will be additional sanitizing and cleaning throughout the building to help keep everyone safe. And finally, as part of those responsibilities of those daytime custodians, those high touch surface areas will get that extra attention in terms of disinfecting. When it comes to Westbrook, Fairview, and Lions Park, we're making great efforts to keep the cohorts of students together to try to minimize that movement and to keep those students with their peers. An adjustment also will have some specials that are usually located in another classroom will now be, that special teacher will be coming to the classroom to provide instruction to those students in that space. We're going to discourage shared supplies as much as possible. And again, this is going to be something at home that we're going to encourage parents to communicate to their students and children prior to coming to school. And then we want to take advantage of the nice weather, and we want to be able to go outside either for lunch or other classroom opportunities whenever weather permits. Lincoln, as we know, looks a lot different, but we are making some changes to try to, make some of these adjustments. So the schedule will change a little bit. And the whole idea with that schedule changing is to minimize the movement of students throughout those hallways. Passing periods are going to be staggered to try to decrease that hall traffic. And then similar to the elementary buildings, we're going to encourage students to go outside as much as possible. Lunch, another area that's going to look very different. Many students will be eating in their classrooms. Now, you know that allergies we take very serious in this district. And as a result of that, we will set up different areas so that students will get priority, whether that is in areas in the classroom or in the multi-purpose room or cafeterias. But we have plans developed in working with our nursing teams to ensure that that is part of our plan. And then in terms of Lincoln, the cafeteria will still be open. Food services will be provided. So any student that wants to come to Lincoln that wants to purchase food will still have the ability to do so. Much like our other schools, there will be some flexibility here into whether they are eating in the cafeteria or if they are eating in their classrooms, because as you know, we need to keep that cafeteria space less than 50. But cafeteria will be open and food will be able to be purchased there. We will be self-certifying to try to cut down on the time it takes for arrival and to kind of keep, some accuracy as far as temperature readings are concerned. So parents are going to have to self-certify to mention that or to state that their students are symptom-free. If students get sick during the school day, our nurses' offices will be able to assess their overall well-being. We're doing some changes not only in the regular nurse's office, but then adding a second office for kind of as an isolation room. The regular nurse's office, plexiglass is being ordered and installed to kind of keep that barrier as an extra level of protection. And in addition to those 4-day custodians to help on cleaning and sanitizing, we're also hiring for nurses' assistants to assist with sick student or sick staff and to make sure if those students move into that isolation room, we'll always have supervision in that area. In addition to that, the drinking fountains are spread out throughout the buildings. However, we are not going to have everyone drinking water from the fountain. We definitely don't want students or staff members putting their mouth in the fountain. However, the bottle refill stations are active, and so individuals can use their water bottles to be able to fill up with water so they can have that throughout the day. In terms of PPE, we need to understand that we're in a crisis. And being that we're in a crisis, this is a crisis budget. My team has been working with 30, 40 different companies and vendors to try to make sure not only that we can have appropriate amounts of PPE, but most importantly, so that it gets here on time. Right now, we're looking to spend between $500,000 to $750,000 on PPE. We realize that that is a ton of money. However, we also realize that student and staff safety is our highest priority here. So to be able to allocate those budget dollars for something as important as this is necessary. We have ordered face shields for some of our specialized personnel. We realized with that recent guidance that has come out on face shields, most people they just won't have the face shields. They'll still have a mask underneath the face shields, but they can have that face shield as an extra level of protection. We have ordered hundreds of gallons of hand sanitizer, and that will be spread out and spaced outside of each classroom. We're going to encourage hand sanitizing prior to coming into the classroom, and in some cases, coming into the building. We're ordering clear children's masks for those who need assistance with lip reading. And then we are also purchasing some N95 masks for specialized personnel. Other PPE and ways the schools are going to look a little different to keep everyone safe. I mentioned when we're looking at classrooms that we have plexiglass that is going to be put on those tables as an extra level of protection, both for small group instruction and in areas where classrooms no longer have desks and have tables, like primary grades over at Westbrook and science areas over at Lincoln. We have also purchased partitions to be placed in schools' offices so we can provide some protection between personnel that work there. Plexiglass is going to be put in school offices to provide that barrier between personnel and visitors, very similar to what you would see in a checkout line in a grocery store or place to pick up food, retail, very similar to something like that. Mentioned before that we have spots on the floor so that students know, try to keep that 6 feet whenever possible with that social distancing. We're also purchasing gowns for nurses and nurses' assistants. There will be a ton of signage in schools to reinforce some of these new measures that are put in place. Not only are they posted outside on the doors, but they're also posted throughout the buildings. So one big thing is signage related to self-certifying. You need to make sure everyone's symptom-free, and there will be signage throughout the building to alert either visitors or volunteers before they enter the building, and as a reminder for staff and students as they're going about their everyday business. Hand washing is going to be highly encouraged throughout the day, and social distancing in hallways. And again, we have signage that will reflect that. I want to spend just a moment talking about transportation because, like the rest of our plan, transportation will look a little different. So all students on bus routes have to wear masks. That's from the moment they are standing on their bus stop to board the bus until the bus finishes and they, as part of dismissal, they leave the bus and are going home. Our bus company, First Student, we have an agreement with them. They're going to sanitize the buses prior to both the AM routes and the PM routes. The buses are keeping with Phase 4 recommendations of gatherings of 50 or less. So our buses will have 50 or less people, including the bus driver and an occasional bus monitor. And then if for some reason students don't have their mask when they board the bus, because we know masks are crucial and necessary, masks will be made available for those individuals riding the bus. And now I'm going to send it back to Dr. Mary Gore, who's going to talk a little bit more in depth about the remote learning option.
Thanks, Adam. Now I'm going to talk more about the remote learning option. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to distinguish the remote learning option this year compared to the remote learning experience of last spring. As we know, the situation last spring was very challenging due to the lack of adequate time and resources to fully prepare for what turned into a long-term and emergency teaching situation. We did the best we could, but we fully acknowledge that that was not an ideal and sustainable model, and we have reflected on the feedback from our parents, our students, and our staff. And together, our task force has worked really hard to ensure that our remote learning plans for this fall are going to be much more robust and comprehensive to align to the needs of our children. So just as an overview, full-time remote learning is significant to know that it requires that parents opt out of the in-person learning experience. The deadline to enroll in this learning option will be July 27th. In order for us to have adequate planning and staff the full remote learning experience, we need enough time to ensure that all the details are worked out and all planning is viable and ready to go for the first day of school, August 20th. So it's critically important that families determine if this is going to be the best plan for their children and their families. What will full-time remote learning entail this fall? Well, our teachers will be prepared to deliver a guaranteed and viable virtual curriculum following a synchronous and asynchronous approach. Synchronous meaning live instruction, and asynchronous meaning recorded instruction that students can view at their leisure or during times that are most important and available to them. Our schedule for remote learning will provide students with portions of independent work time and also times for small group meetings with teachers and even some one-on-one sessions with their teachers. We realize that in in-person learning, students have all of these options afforded to them, both whole group instruction, small group instruction, one-on-one instruction. And for that reason, we think it's essential that our virtual learning experience has this as well. We will align the remote learning program to the in-person learning through common resources, our digital platforms of Google Classroom or Seesaw, and of course have alignment to our grade level curriculum and the pacing that will be occurring for in-person instruction. There will be an emphasis on consistent teacher feedback and grading that is comparable to our in-person instruction model as well. We realized that this was a bit uneven last spring, and quality feedback is an essential component to any viable and comprehensive instructional model, so that will be a huge focus for us this year. We also realize that students are going to need social emotional supports when they're in remote learning as well. So there will be weekly social emotional lessons with the teacher where coping skills and pro-social skills will be addressed in the context of a strong and supportive learning community. It will be challenging, we think, for children to form strong relationships with their teachers and their classmates in the context of remote learning. And for that reason, we will put intentional and proactive plans in place to provide children with lots of opportunities to form those relationships just as they would in an in-person learning setting. We think it will be challenging, but we're up for the challenge. And we have a lot of great resources, both in our talented mental health staff of our social workers and our school psychologists, as well as our commitment as a district to have relationships be at the center of our work. That will not change if you choose a remote learning experience for your child. You can count on that being part of our program. We also will keep a commitment to assessments, which are so critical for us to understand what skills students have and what skills students need to be reinforced. And so we will engage in benchmark assessments in a remote context, just as we do in in-person learning every year. We also want to point out that this full-time remote learning option is likely one for students who have elevated health risks or for families who may have elevated health risks in their families. But we also are allowing parents of students who simply prefer that remote learning is the option that is the best fit for their family, that they are eligible to enroll in this. We're not putting any prerequisites or requiring parents to apply for this status. We are opening up remote learning to all of our families, again, with the request that there is a minimum commitment for one grading period in order for there to be viable and consistent plans and experiences for our children. I also want to point out that we were fortunate to receive money from the federal government through the CARES Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Grant. We received approximately $77,000, which was used to purchase licenses for Zoom and other online resources such as Screencastify, which is a great tool for recording presentations like this one, and also Newsella for our Fairview, Lions Park, and Lincoln students, and many other subscriptions that really will make remote learning a more robust and comprehensive experience. Now I will be heading this back to my colleague Adam, who will be talking about the next steps for families.
All District 57 families are going to be required to submit a fall attendance plan form for every single student. On Friday, July 17th, a link will be emailed to all District 57 families. Please be sure to look out for that link. We are giving families 10 days to submit that form to be able to make a clear decision of what their intentions are for the fall. Monday, July 27th is when that deadline is to submit that form so that the administration can begin planning for the upcoming school year. So just recapping some of those important dates. Friday, July 17th is when the window opens for families to designate either in-person learning or remote learning. That will be part of that survey that's being sent out. The window will close on Monday, July 27th. On August the 12th, class placement and information will be sent out to parents. And as we know, the school district calendar has been adjusted slightly to now the first day of school being Thursday, August 20th. That's also the day of the Board of Education meeting. On behalf of Dr. Elaine Allmiller, Dr. Mary Gore, I would like to thank you for the time you spent watching our presentation. This has been a very important and crucial plan that we've spent a lot of time putting together. Wanted to listen to the feedback from families and be able to give families both options depending on what suits your child's needs. This survey, in addition to an FAQ, will be posted to the website, which will give you some further information. Thank you.